Okay guys, let's talk about the worst advice you can give to a single person. And yet these are 5 of the most common messages that Christian singles hear. Let's deconstruct these 5 messages today and talk about why they're not healthy, they're not biblical, and they're actually keeping us living in shame and even keeping us single sometimes. Welcome back to another episode of Life Advice You Don't Hear in Church. My name's Tiffany Dawn, and hit subscribe to see more videos like this. If you've been here a while, you know that I got married shortly before I turned 29. Now, I had dreamed about getting married by the ripe old age of 20, and by the time I was 16, I was freaking out that I was never gonna get married. So you can imagine 29 seemed like a long time away. That being said, getting married in your 20s is very different than getting married in your 30s. And I have friends who didn't get married until their late 30s or who are in their late 30s now and are still single. And that can be a very difficult and painful journey. So I don't want to seem like I totally get it, because I don't. That's a whole nother ballgame. But there are 5 messages that I heard in church culture and that I think are still being shared in church culture that are so unhealthy and unhelpful and do more harm than good. And I think we need to just deconstruct these, essentially realize why these are not biblical or helpful, and they need to get out of our lives. Message number 1 that I heard all the time is this idea that once I became content, God sent my husband. Or another way of saying it, if you're still single, there's probably something wrong with your character that God is working on in you. As if being single means there's something wrong with you. I remember being single and looking around and being like, look at my friends getting married. They do not have a better character than I do. And I'm like, why am I not getting in a relationship? What's wrong with me? And it was this idea that something must be wrong if God hasn't sent my husband. And sometimes we just want an explanation to latch onto that's easy to understand and like says, okay, well, maybe there's something I need to do so we don't feel so out of control. And I get that. But the truth is, it doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. Now, it could be that there's something you're doing without realizing it that is keeping you single in some ways. And James and I actually have a whole course about that called Updating, linked below it. It's 10 hurdles that can keep you single without realizing it. But that doesn't mean something is wrong with you or your character. Just sometimes we do things that we don't realize we're doing. But a lot of times it's just that you haven't met somebody you connect with yet. It reminds me of the story of Jesus healing this blind man and then being asked, well, what did he do to deserve being blind? Like, what did he do wrong or his parents do wrong? And Jesus is like, nothing. He didn't do anything wrong. Life happens. Singleness happens, and it doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. The second message I heard all the time was trusting God means waiting on God. It was this idea of you have to be a passive participant. Like, in God's time, He will write your love story, and all you have to do is pray and wait. Just fall asleep in Jesus, and He will write your love story. And this makes us feel like, well, if I'm interested in someone, all I can do is pray about it. And I remember doing this when I was young, and I remember one guy in particular who I was like, he's a great guy, like, I'm totally a great girl, like, yes. And then this other girl came along who would flirt with him and kind of put herself out there and make her interest known instead of like hiding it all. And he got with her. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, my character is so much better. Why is he not with me? Very judgmental, I know. But the truth is, like, he probably didn't even have a clue that I was interested, because I was just praying about it and just passively watching my life go by, waiting for God to intervene in a dramatic miracle. But in most of life, we have to actually take steps. It's a biblical principle of you sow what you reap. Or look at Ruth and Boaz. People talk about wanting their Boaz, but they don't go and be Ruth and sleep at his feet. Not that you have to go sleep at a guy's feet. It's a little weird, but she took that first step. It's okay to say, do you want to go get coffee? Do you want to go out for ice cream? It's okay to even ask a guy out. It's okay to make the first move. That doesn't mean that you are the pursuer of the relationship, because the truth is, you should both be pursuing each other. I know people say the guys to make the first move is like Christ and the church pursuing the church. Guys, even if you're using that example, we need to be pursuing God just like God's pursuing us, right? It's reciprocal, even if you're using that as your example. Both people in a relationship need to be pursuing each other. It has to be mutual. If just one person is doing the pursuing, it's going to be a one-sided, unhealthy relationship with weird power dynamics. Both of you need to be pursuing each other. And that happens over time. It's not who asked who out first. It's over time, are you both pursuing each other? Message number 3 that I internalized was, when you meet him, you will just know it's the one. Or said other ways, don't date him unless you already think you could marry him. I I remember reading I Kissed Dating Goodbye and listening to Rebecca St. James' Wait for Me, if you guys remember those, and thinking like, I am just gonna know deep down, it'll just be different than the other guys I've met. And this is also a very romanticized Hollywood idea of love too. Just this like, I'm just gonna know. What I've learned is that doesn't always happen. For some people it does, but for a lot of the couples that I know who are married and in healthy relationships, they did not have that initial knowing. A lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them even second guessed their relationship or felt like they were gonna throw up when they were trying to get to know each other because of fear. And a lot of that actually comes from growing up with this fear-based approach to dating and relationships. It's like, you're so afraid of making a mistake. You're so afraid of being used. You're so afraid of the messages of boys will be boys and you have to protect yourself, that then when you get to a relationship, there's all this internalized fear and trauma. And so sometimes the fear that you feel about a relationship has nothing to do with if that's a good person for you or if it could be a healthy relationship. A lot of times it's just you're being triggered and you need to heal from some of that fear-based life that you were raised in. Now, if you're like, this does not seem like a safe person, or this seems like a really not so great guy, that's different. I'm not talking about that. But if you're just feeling like, I'm afraid of relationships, oh my goodness, I kind of want to throw up right now going on a first date, or I kind of want to break up with him like 5 days into our relationship, which is what happened with me and James, then maybe just hold on a little bit longer, just push through that initial discomfort and just see how it feels after that. As you push through that and you can actually get to know him and feel safe together, then how does the relationship feel? Give it a couple months. Just see, how does it feel then? Because you might know when you first meet him and you might not know. Or you could be like me and you could meet a whole bunch of guys that you initially think that's the one for me until you get to know them and then you realize they are not the one for you at all. Message number 4 is something that I never heard said out loud. It was more something I internalized. And it's this idea that your main goal in life is to be married. People would even say, no, that's not true. That's not what we teach in Christianity. But it's this idea that comes through of like, I am working toward marriage. I want to get married. I remember my first boyfriend at 17 years old. We had been dating for like a week and people at church were asking me, do you think you'll marry him? That was like the goal. And marriage is great. And if that is your desire, that's wonderful. It was for me too. But it is not the end goal of our lives. You do not have more worth if you are married than if you're not. Side note here, how sexist is it that married women are called Mrs., unmarried women are called Miss, and guys are just called Mr. no matter what? That's why my kids call people Mr. So-and-so and Miss so-and-so, regardless of relationship status. Why do we act like women have more worth if they're married? And that's like a secular thing, not a Christian thing. Your relationship status doesn't change your worth, and yet we feel like it does a lot of times, especially as single women. So realizing marriage is not the one goal of my life. It is not going to fix everything in my life. Realizing it's okay to desire that. It's okay to long for that, but it's not the end goal. And lastly, message number 5 is Jesus is your husband for now. Jesus can fill all those desires you have for a personal romantic relationship in this life if you just let him, if you just surrender and trust him and come close to him. Nowhere in the Bible does it teach that. What the heck? That's weird stuff, guys. Now, let me clarify. When I was single, I did feel like I had this special relationship with God in that season. That was different than I felt in a lot of other seasons. I think that's true sometimes for some personalities in seasons of pain and grief and struggle. There's this like special grace and connection that you feel with God in those seasons. That's awesome. But it doesn't mean that you have to feel this pressure for Jesus to meet all your needs or make you feel so satisfied in Jesus that you don't even want a relationship. Like, that's just weird. When the Bible talks about the bride of Christ, it talks about the whole entire church throughout history, time, and space, right? The whole entire church as this example of the bride and Jesus as the bridegroom. It's not an individual like Jesus is my husband thing. And so take that pressure off. You don't have to feel like Jesus is going to satisfy me in every way and I'll lose that desire for a husband. No, it doesn't work like that. That is not even biblical. And I honestly have no idea where that idea came from. So let's let that go. What else would you guys add in the comments? Ideas you've heard about being a Christian single that are just unhealthy, unhelpful, and just straight up not true. Comment below what you'd add. I love you guys and I'll see you next week. I hope this can help you live in freedom. Bye.